Dear friends, great to see you back on the channel. Before we begin, a big request. Please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell. YouTube continues to throttle military analysis, videos get shadow banned, and many of you simply don't see new episodes in your feed. The bell remains the only reliable way to get notified about fresh briefings. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel and stays with us despite all the algorithmic obstacles. Now to business. Today we'll move along the entire front line and break down every change on the map over the weekend. And I'll start with the main story, Kostiantynivka. The Kostiantynivka pocket has collapsed. Several hundred AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, troops who remained encircled in the Metallur district found themselves in a hopeless position. Today there's word that the entire area has been fully cleared of Ukrainian forces. The AFU can no longer leave the city in an organized way. The road to Druzhkivka is cut, and any orderly withdrawal route for the garrison is effectively closed. The remnants of the central industrial zone, which the Ukrainian side clung to until the last, have also fallen. The industrial sprawl with its workshops and solid walls long allowed the defense to hold. But now that line too has been passed. As confirmation, footage has appeared in which a commander of the Russian Yug South grouping shows the current state of the Kostiantynivka metallurgical plant. The plant was badly damaged in the fighting, but there are no Ukrainian units left there. They've been completely pushed out. In all likelihood, the plant will be restored. The destruction here isn't as critical as, for example, at Mariupol's Azovstal, and the facility could well return to service for the needs of Donbass metallurgy. In the Novoselivka and Krasny, in Ukrainian Chervony districts, active fighting continues. Fewer updates come in over the weekend by tradition, but that doesn't mean the front has stopped. Russian forces keep advancing deeper into the private sector housing, seeking to finally squeeze the AFU out of these districts as well. With logistics cut and the controlled area shrinking, the fate of the city's defense looks sealed. Before moving to the other sectors, I'll note the most important event of the past day, which somehow went almost unnoticed. A massive Russian strike on the bridges across the Dnipro, near Zaporizhzhia. This appears to have happened for the first time since the start of the conflict. The strikes targeted several bridges linking the western and eastern banks, including the Preobrazhensky Bridge and the cable-stayed Vantovyi Bridge, as well as structures connected to the hydroelectric station in the northern part of the city. According to the Ukrainian side, around 12 aerial bombs were used. Judging by the published footage of craters near the bridges, the strikes were more like ranging shots. There don't yet seem to be precise enough means to hit the bridge spans directly, and the blasts are recorded at the bridge approaches rather than over the river itself. Even so, the significance of this move is enormous. The supply of the entire Ukrainian grouping in the Kharkiv agglomeration and across the Zaporizhzhia sector as a whole depends on these crossings. If the bridges can be disabled or seriously damaged, and that can be done precisely with aerial bombs, the front southeast of Zaporizhzhia risks crumbling due to supply disruptions for the groupings near Kharkiv, Huliaipol, and Pokrovsk. In that case, the logistics shoulder would have to be rerouted through Dnipropetrovsk region, which is extremely difficult in terms of traffic. Zaporizhzhia sector, AFU command, long ago concentrated a large share of its reserves here, trying for months to dislodge Russian forces from Stepnohirsk. But the offensive has bogged down. Russian troops still hold the southern part of the settlement, clinging to the remaining apartment blocks, and the Ukrainian side simply can't push them back toward neighboring Plavny and Kupiansk to the south. South of Kharkiv, Russian forces improved their positions, advancing in the southern part of Novodanilivka. Positional fighting of local significance has gone on here for a long time. From the south, the Russian grouping effectively reached Kharkiv and stopped, waiting for the neighboring Vostok East grouping to pull up from the east and break through the last defensive line covering the city from the northeast. It runs through Omelnik, Yehorivka, Novoselivka, and the already captured Huliaipolska. Only after that will a full envelopment of Kharkiv begin simultaneously from the south, east, and north, which is why a frontal assault on Malotokmachka makes little sense for the Russian side right now. In effect, the siege of Kharkiv is already beginning, and at this stage it amounts to the steady attrition of the entire agglomeration. The Ukrainian side is trying to move reinforcements along Road 08, but judging by strike footage, that route is under full fire control and supply for the defenders is constantly disrupted. Dnipropetrovsk region. Russian forces restored full control over the village of Novomykolivka, finally driving the AFU out, and entered the southeastern part of neighboring Kalinivske. This whole sector is open fields, perfectly swept by drones, while the settlements are small, ruined villages and hamlets that are extremely hard to hold. Hence the constant seesaw, positions change hands and linger in the grey zone for long stretches. The same applies to Novokhrihorivka and Novohyorhivka. Formerly, Ukrainian units entered them about a week ago, but control remains highly disputed. Often it comes down to one or two soldiers running into a village and waiting it out in a basement, hiding from drones. And that's already presented as control over the settlement, even though in reality the area stays a grey zone and there's no talk of serious advances. Further north, on the Shakhtarske axis, evacuation was announced throughout May and June around Charivne, Vasilivka and Mykolivka. The Ukrainian side is now actively occupying buildings and structures there, moving in units to hold the line toward Dnipropetrovsk region and Zaporizhzhia. And those buildings are regularly hit by drone strikes. Sloviansk, Kostiantynivka agglomeration. According to some Western experts, the first sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the Russian army have already entered the Osikov area, that is, Oleksievo-Druzhkivka. Thus, Russian units are gradually moving beyond Kostiantynivka and advancing along the Kryvyi Torets River toward the center of the agglomeration. Map corrections are possible here in the near future. The N20 highway linking Sloviansk and Kostiantynivka is under full fire control. Plenty of footage is being published of artillery strikes on transport moving across the agglomeration. This threatens to cut the agglomeration into smaller pockets that the Russian side will deal with one by one. East of Sloviansk, the Russian army is also advancing. Druzhkivka and the large settlement of Rai Oleksandrivka were taken earlier, and an important defensive node on this sector collapsed. And today there's word of the clearing of the tree lines south of Kriva Luka. That area has also passed under Russian control. Lyman. In essence, this is a second Kostiantynivka, going by the speed with which the AFU is abandoning the city. Lyman is roughly 90% private sector housing, and the units defending it are mostly territorial defense, whose motivation to hold the line is low. There are almost no apartment blocks here to cling to until the last, as in Kostiantynivka, and the private houses fall apart from any hit. Over the past week, the entire north of the city and its southeastern part have come under Russian control, and Russian forces are also present in the southern industrial zone. Today, 2 more districts were taken, notably both tied to Orthodox churches: the area around the Church of St. Nicholas with its adjacent buildings, and the area around the Church of the Iveron icon of the Mother of God, from which Russian units reached the Zeleny Klin station and are gradually mopping up this remnant of the city. A pocket is taking shape in the central part, fighting is underway in the western part of Drobyshev, and there's word of infiltration into the eastern outskirts of Sviatohirsk. Russian command has clearly set a course to push the AFU back across the Siversky Donets River, and once Lyman falls, there will be nothing left for the Ukrainian side to hold on this bank. It will simply be forced to fall back across the river. Kharkiv region. Near Kupiansk, fighting continues around the TB clinic in the north of the city. The northern left bank part is under Russian forces, the south under the AFU, while the center remains a solid grey zone with constant seesawing, small infiltrations by a handful of troops from one side or the other, with the same positions changing hands again and again. Little of the city remains. Around 90% of buildings have been destroyed in the fighting, and there's no sign whatsoever of a decisive shift in either side's favor. In the border area, the situation is different. Here, the Russian side dominates. A large-scale offensive on Bilyi Kolodiaz is developing. Russian forces are moving along a broad front from Shesterivka to Akhimivka, advancing from the direction of Vovchansk, finishing off Losivka and entering neighboring Ukrainske in order to push further toward Shevchenkov, Yurchenkov and Bilyi Kolodiaz itself, which is regularly hit with aerial bombs to soften up the defense. Of the major settlements in this part of the region, only the captured and heavily destroyed Vovchansk remains, where half the buildings are literally down to their foundations, along with the aforementioned Kupiansk. Everything between them is fields, small villages, and 4 large settlements: Bili Kolodiaz, Prikolotne, Veliki Burluk, and Kolodiazne. Their loss would mean the complete collapse of Ukrainian defenses in this part of Kharkiv region. North of Kharkiv, fighting continues for Kozacha Lopan, so far without major changes. Reports are coming in more and more often from the Zolochiv area, where the Russian army is striking with aerial bombs, softening up the defense on the northwestern and northern Kharkiv axes, with an eye to a possible offensive here as well. Sumy sector. Here the Russian side has managed to substantially improve its positions. While the picture at the end of June 19th was one thing, by the end of June 21st, Russian units are already actively approaching Khotin from the northeast, advancing in the Pisarivka area, fighting for Volzhanske and improving their positions near Novosibirsk and Kyanitsia. If over the next month they manage to take control of all the listed points, one could speak of a kind of northern Sumy breakthrough. The front line north of Sumy would collapse, and the distance to the regional capital would shrink to roughly 10 kilometers. That would put the routes through Sumy toward Kharkiv under fire control and effectively open fighting for the city itself. Judging by the briefings of the Seva North grouping, the Sumy battle remains one of the priorities. The Ukrainian side is doing everything it can to keep Russian forces from reaching the large forest tract, under whose cover, hiding from drones beneath the foliage, the advance towards Sumy would accelerate sharply. The Crimea node. The main geopolitical intrigue of the day is a massive Ukrainian strike on Kerch in the immediate vicinity of the Crimean bridge. A great deal of objective control footage has been published. Some of the drones were shot down on approach, but a significant number reached the crossing and the fuel reservoirs, several of which are seriously damaged. The footage shows enormous queues of trucks and tractor-trailers heading to the Kerch crossing. After restrictions on carrying petroleum products across the Crimean bridge, it became the main way to supply the peninsula, and the build-up of transport here has grown many times over, stretching perhaps for tens of kilometers. Ukrainian sources are hinting at a possible new strike on the bridge itself. The logic is simple: create a fuel crisis on the peninsula to force the Russian side to open the bridge for fuel tankers and other cargo, then try to strike it at the moment of maximum concentration of vehicles. For now, Russia isn't taking that step and is instead reinforcing logistics north of Crimea. In the Henichesk and Armyansk areas, according to fresh satellite imagery, not only pontoon crossings but also causeways are being built there, which can't be destroyed by either drone or missile. A damaged stretch is simply filled in again. Once 3 or 4 such crossings appear along northern Crimea near Armyansk, Henichesk and Chonhar, the supply problem will largely be resolved, although the M18 and M14 highways still remain under some fire control. The Russian side is actively countering this, including with a system that jams satellite communications over the sector. On the peninsula itself, fuel is now released only to state structures that sustain the region's life support. It isn't sold to companies, to individuals, or on coupons. Time in this situation works in the Russian side's favor, but the conflict is clearly escalating, and Kyiv is knowingly going all in, understanding that in response to strikes on Crimean logistics, strikes on the bridges across the Dnipro will intensify. Mutual strikes. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, by 9 in the morning on June 21st, the Russian side had deployed 109 drones, a low figure, 99 the day before, 90 2 days earlier, which, given a capacity of 250 craft per day, points to an accumulation of around 500 drones for the next massive strike. Strikes continue on the southwest of Odessa region, which is effectively cut off from the rest of Ukraine. After Sarata and Monashi, an oil depot in Artsiz was hit. Over 3 days, several fuel infrastructure facilities have been destroyed here, indicating tight fire control over the sector. As soon as new fuel tankers appear, they're struck at once. Missile strikes were also carried out overnight. There are reports of 4 to 8 Iskanders and several Banderol cruise missiles used against Poltava, where a vehicle and tractor-trailer staging area was hit. Logistics came under fire too. Warehouses in the Borispil area were almost completely destroyed, and yet another Nova Poshta terminal was damaged west of Kharkiv. And after the first drone strikes on such facilities, more massive missile strikes usually follow. Overall, the Russian side is now working systematically against fuel stations and logistics hubs, and is now bringing bridges into the mix as well. That's the picture at the front over the past weekend. Thanks for watching to the end, dear friends. If this episode was useful, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss new briefings. See you next time.